It was just another Tuesday evening. 3 years of marriage with Emily had settled into a comfortable routine. We were watching some forgettable reality show when her phone rang. I barely looked up until I heard her gasp. When I turned, her face had drained of color, her hand trembling as she held the phone. Then came the tears, sudden and uncontrollable. She looked at me with eyes I barely recognized and said words that would change everything. "Jack, please, I need you to take me to the hospital. Craig had a serious accident. Please," she sobbed, "I need to be there. I still love him." The room seemed to tilt. I stayed quiet, grabbed my keys, and drove her there, watching in my rearview mirror as my marriage began to crumble with each mile. Before I continue with what happened at the hospital, and after, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever had to make a tough decision that broke your heart but saved your dignity. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength when your world falls apart. To understand the magnitude of that moment, I need to take you back to the beginning. I am Jack, 32 years old, working as a structural engineer in Chicago. My friends have always described me as level-headed, perhaps sometimes to a fault. Patient, reliable, the guy who thinks before he speaks. Not exactly the life of the party, but someone you would call at 3 in the morning if you needed help. I met Emily at a mutual friend's wedding 4 years ago. She was a bridesmaid. I was a groomsman, and the whole wedding party setup practically forced us to interact. But once we started talking, no forcing was necessary. Emily was a third-grade teacher with an infectious laugh and eyes that lit up when she talked about her students. Where I was reserved, she was expressive. Where I calculated risks, she embraced spontaneity. She pulled me onto the dance floor despite my protests and somehow made me enjoy it. "You think too much," she told me that night, straightening my tie after I had loosened it. "Sometimes you just need to feel." We exchanged numbers, and within a week, we had our first date at a small Italian restaurant downtown. 6 months of dating led to an engagement, and a year after meeting, we were married in a modest ceremony with close friends and family. During our courtship and early marriage, Craig was just a name that occasionally came up in conversation. Her ex-boyfriend of nearly 5 years, they had broken up about 6 months before she met me. According to Emily, he was her first love, but ultimately not right for her. He was too ambitious, she explained once. Everything was about his career and finance. I was always second place. I never pushed for more details. Everyone has a past, and I was secure enough in our relationship not to feel threatened by hers. At least that is what I told myself. Looking back now, there were signs I chose to ignore. Emily kept in contact with Craig, despite knowing it made me uncomfortable. Not regular contact, but birthday messages, occasional likes on social media, and even a coffee meetup once when they ran into each other downtown. I told myself this was maturity, not keeping animosity with an ex. During arguments, Emily would sometimes make comparisons. Craig would never forget an anniversary, or Craig always noticed when I changed my hair. Small comments seemingly innocuous, but they stung in a way that lingered. At gatherings with friends who knew them both, Craig's name would invariably come up, and Emily's reactions were always a bit too animated, her laugh a bit too loud, her stories a bit too detailed for someone supposedly relegated to her past. The most telling sign, one I buried deep under layers of denial, was that Emily occasionally called me Craig by mistake. Not often, maybe 3 or 4 times in our marriage. Each time she would look mortified, apologize profusely, and I would assure her it was fine, just a slip of the tongue. But each occurrence lodged in my heart like a splinter, small but impossible to ignore completely. Despite these warning signs, I believed in us. I believed my love and loyalty could build a foundation strong enough to withstand any lingering feelings she might have for her past. I believed that choosing someone every day mattered more than who you once loved. I believed that our shared dreams of buying a house in the suburbs, having 2 kids, maybe a dog, represented a future she genuinely wanted with me. We had good times, truly. Weekends exploring Chicago's neighborhoods, a memorable road trip along the Great Lakes, quiet evenings cooking together in our small apartment kitchen. We had inside jokes and favorite restaurants, and a side of the bed that was unmistakably ours. We had built a life that, while perhaps not as passionate as I sometimes wished, felt real and solid. Which is why, when Emily looked at me that Tuesday night with tears streaming down her face and confessed that she still loved another man, it felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage suddenly came into question. Had the past 3 years been real at all? Had she been thinking of him every time she was with me? Was I ever anything more than a substitute, a placeholder for the man she truly wanted? These questions swirled in my mind as I grabbed my keys, without a word, and led her to our car. Sometimes the most devastating moments arrive not with a bang, but with a quiet realization that what you thought was true never really existed at all. The call came at 9:17 p.m. I remember checking the time because the reality show we were watching ended at 9:30, and I was mentally calculating if I had time to take out the trash before bed. Such mundane thoughts right before your life changes forever. Emily answered the phone with a casual hello. Her expression shifted so quickly, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. First confusion, then shock, then pure, unfiltered panic. What? When? How bad is it? Her voice rose with each question. Which hospital is he going to be okay? I muted the television, instantly alert. Emily's hand was pressed against her mouth, tears already forming. What happened? I asked when she lowered the phone. It is Craig, she said, her voice breaking. He was in a car accident. Head-on collision. They do not know if he will make it through surgery. It was the raw fear in her eyes that first alerted me that this was more than concern for an ex. I had seen Emily upset before when she heard about tragedies or accidents involving acquaintances. This was different. This was primal. I need to go to the hospital, she said already, standing searching frantically for her shoes. Please, Jack, I need you to drive me. I cannot drive like this. I stood too confused but ready to support my wife through whatever this was. Of course. Which hospital? Northwestern Memorial, she said, finding her shoes and jamming her feet into them without bothering with the laces. Then she looked up at me, and in a moment of either complete honesty or complete disregard for my feelings, added, I need to be there. I still love him, Jack. I never stopped loving him. The words hung in the air between us. Time seemed to slow down. I felt my heart constrict painfully in my chest, but my face remained expressionless. A strange calm descended over me, the kind that comes in moments of crisis when emotions are too overwhelming to process immediately. I simply picked up my keys from the counter and said, "Let us go." The drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital took 30 minutes that felt like both an eternity and an instant. Emily spent it alternating between sobbing quietly and making phone calls to mutual friends of hers, and Craig's gathering what information she could. I drove in silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind curiously blank except for the mechanical task of navigating evening traffic. When we arrived at the hospital, Emily was out of the car before I had fully stopped in the emergency room drop-off zone. She ran toward the entrance without a backward glance, without a thank you, without any acknowledgement of my existence. I watched her disappear through the sliding doors, then pulled away to find parking. By the time I made my way to the surgical waiting area, Emily was already surrounded by a group of people I vaguely recognized from photos or brief mentions. Friends of Craig's, perhaps some colleagues from his investment firm. Emily was in the center of them, her face buried in the shoulder of a tall woman with a sleek bob, her body shaking with sobs. I stood at the periphery, suddenly an outsider in my own marriage. No one noticed me or acknowledged my presence. I sat in a chair in the corner of the waiting room, watching my wife grieve for another man with a depth of emotion she had never shown for anything in our life together. A nurse came out to update the group at one point. Craig was in surgery, critical but stable. Multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, but the doctors were optimistic. The group collectively exhaled in relief. Emily asked detailed questions about his condition, his prognosis, when she could see him. Her focus was total, her concern absolute. I approached the same nurse later when she was alone at her station. "The patient, they are waiting for Craig Donovan," I said. "Is he going to make it?" The nurse glanced at her computer screen. "Are you family?" "No," I admitted. "Just a friend." She softened slightly. "He is still in surgery, but the doctors are hopeful. He is young and in good health, which helps." "Are you with that group?" She nodded toward Emily and the others. "Sort of," I said. "My wife is his." I paused, unsure how to describe what Emily was to Craig now. They know each other from before. The nurse nodded sympathetically, perhaps sensing more to the story. "Well, it might be a long night. The waiting room is open, or there is a cafeteria on the first floor if you need coffee." "Thank you," I said, then added, "Is he someone important? There are a lot of people here." "He works in finance, I think," she said. "One of the big firms downtown. We get their executives here sometimes. They tend to get a lot of visitors." I thanked her again and returned to my corner seat. For 2 hours, I watched Emily move through the waiting room, speaking with different people, checking her phone, constantly approaching the nurse's station for updates. Not once did she look for me or acknowledge me. Not once did she seem to remember I was there at all. At 1:45 p.m., I made a decision. I stood, took one last look at my wife, deeply engrossed in conversation with a man in a expensive-looking suit, and walked out. She did not see me leave. I drove home alone, the radio off, the only sound the occasional directions from my GPS and my own measured breathing. In the quietness of our car, with the nighttime Chicago skyline glittering in my periphery, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. My wife loved another man, had always loved him. Our marriage, the life we had built, was at best her second choice, at worst a complete lie. As I drove, a strange sense of clarity began to replace the numbness. By the time I pulled into our apartment building's parking garage, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Once inside our apartment, I moved with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. I found a duffel bag in our closet and began filling it methodically: essential clothing, toiletries, important documents, a few sentimental items that were unquestionably mine. I was neither rushing nor dawdling. Each item I packed felt like a small but decisive step toward reclaiming my dignity. As I moved through the apartment, I could not help but see the remnants of what I had thought was our happy life together. The wedding photo on the bookshelf, Emily in her simple white dress, me in my navy suit, both of us smiling at each other as if no one else existed. The collection of refrigerator magnets from places we had visited together. The throw blanket Emily had given me for my birthday because I was always cold during movie nights. These objects, once sources of comfort, now felt like props in a play where I had been the only one who did not realize it was all make-believe. I left them untouched. They belonged to a version of my life that was ending tonight. I called my friend Aaron around 1:00 a.m. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Jack, everything okay, man? I need a place to stay for a few days," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Can I crash on your couch?" Aaron was immediately alert. "Of course. What is going on? Is it Emily?" "I will explain when I get there," I said. "Thanks, Aaron. I owe you. Do not be ridiculous. Come over whenever. Door will be unlocked." After ending the call, I sat at our kitchen table and wrote a note on the back of a grocery list. My handwriting was remarkably even considering the circumstances. "Do not worry, he can have you now. Simple, direct, final." I placed the note on the kitchen counter where Emily would see it immediately upon entering. Then I took one final walk through the apartment, making sure lights were turned off, doors were locked, everything was in its proper place. Even in my pain, I was still me, the responsible, thorough engineer who checked and double-checked. In our bedroom, I paused by Emily's nightstand. Her reading glasses were folded neatly beside a novel she had been working through for weeks. Her lavender hand cream, a small dish with her wedding ring, which she removed at night to prevent scratching herself in her sleep. I picked up the ring, studying the modest diamond that had represented my promise to her. For a moment I considered taking it, but then carefully replaced it in the dish. It was a symbol of something that had never truly existed. Back in the living room, I looked out at the Chicago skyline from our 14th floor window. We had chosen this apartment partly for this view, saving for months to afford the slightly higher rent. I had imagined countless evenings spent on our small balcony watching the city lights with Emily in my arms. Now I wondered how many of those evenings she had spent, wishing she was with Craig instead. I turned off my phone, knowing Emily would eventually realize I was gone and try to contact me. I did not want to hear her explanations or excuses. Not yet, perhaps not ever. As I shouldered my duffel bag and took one last look around, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Overwhelming pain, yes, but also strangely relief. The constant, subtle anxiety of suspecting but not knowing, of sensing something was wrong but not being able to name it, that was over now. The truth, however, painful, was finally in the open. I locked the door behind me and walked toward the elevator, stepping into a new chapter of my life as the first light of dawn began to brighten the eastern sky. 24 hours after leaving our apartment, I turned my phone back on while sitting in Aaron's living room. The device buzzed continuously for nearly a minute as notifications flooded in. 15 missed calls from Emily. 27 text messages. 3 voicemails. The first texts were confused. "Where are you? Did you come to the hospital? Are you okay?" Then came the realization, "I just got home and saw your note. Jack, please call me." After that panic set in, I did not mean what I said. I was emotional. Please come home so we can talk. It is not what you think. The final messages were desperate pleas. I love you, not him. I made a terrible mistake. Please do not throw away our marriage over one stupid comment. I read through each message without responding, then listen to the voicemails. Emily's voice evolved from confusion to tears to a kind of frantic bargaining. In the last message, recorded just an hour before she was barely coherent through her crying, Aaron, who had taken the day off work to be with me, watched from the kitchen where he was making coffee. She has been calling me too, he said. And Lisa and pretty much everyone we know. She showed up here around 9 this morning, but I told her you needed space. How did she seem? I asked, not entirely sure why I cared. Aaron brought over 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from me. Honestly, a mess. Crying, no makeup, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. She said there was a misunderstanding, that she was just in shock about Craig's accident, and said something she did not mean. I took a sip of coffee and considered this. Do you believe her? Aaron hesitated. I think she believes it, but Jackman, I have got to be honest with you. This is not coming from nowhere. The way she talks about that guy, even at your wedding reception, remember Lisa and I have always thought. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. That she was not over him, I finished. Yeah, I think I always knew too. I just did not want to see it. Over the next few days, I maintained my silence with Emily while planning my next steps. I contacted a lawyer to understand my options regarding our lease and the eventual divorce. I looked into job opportunities outside of Chicago, feeling a strong need for a complete change of environment. I settled on Seattle, where my company had a growing office, and I had a standing offer to transfer if I ever wanted to. A week after moving to Aaron's, I finally agreed to meet Emily at a neutral coffee shop to discuss the situation. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner with a clear view of the door. When Emily entered, I almost did not recognize her. She had lost weight in just a week. Her usually bright eyes were dull and circled with dark shadows, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She sat down across from me, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, as if seeking warmth despite the mild spring day. Thank you for meeting me, she said, her voice hoarse. I nodded but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Jack, what I said that night, I did not mean it. I was in shock. When you hear someone you once cared about might be dying, you do not think clearly. You said you still love him, I replied, keeping my voice even. That sounds pretty clear to me. It was just words, she insisted, reaching across the table for my hand. I pulled back slightly and she withdrew. I was emotional. Craig was a big part of my life for a long time, and hearing he might die was overwhelming. But that does not mean I love him or want to be with him. I looked at her directly. Emily, have you maintained contact with Craig throughout our marriage? She hesitated, which was answer enough. Occasionally. Just friendly check-ins. How occasionally? Another pause. Maybe once a month or so. Sometimes more if something important happened in his life or mine. Did you meet him in person during our marriage? Her eyes dropped to her coffee. A few times. Just for coffee or lunch. Nothing happened, Jack, I swear. Why did you not tell me about these meetings? Because I knew you would be upset or misunderstand. She looked up, a flash of defensiveness in her eyes. It is not wrong to have friends. No, I agreed. It is not wrong to have friends. It is wrong to lie to your spouse about seeing an ex you apparently still have feelings for. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I do not have feelings for him. Not like that. It is complicated. Then, uncomplicate it for me, I said. Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you married me while still in love with him. Her silence stretched for several seconds. I love you, Jack. I chose you. Something in her phrasing struck me. But you still have feelings for Craig. I care about him, she admitted. We have history. That is not what I asked. Emily took a shaky breath. When Craig and I broke up, it was not because we stopped loving each other. It was because he was focused on his career, and I wanted more attention, more stability. He was always traveling, always working late. I got tired of being alone. The pieces suddenly fell into place with painful clarity. So I was the safe choice, I said, the reliable one who would be home for dinner every night, who would not put work first. That is not fair, she protested, but her eyes told me I had hit the mark. Have you ever been fully committed to our marriage, Emily? Or was I always just the backup plan in case things did not work out with Craig? She reached for my hand again, and this time I let her take it, wanting to feel something, anything that might convince me our marriage had been real. I love your kindness, your stability, your thoughtfulness, she said earnestly. You are a wonderful man, Jack. I gently withdrew my hand. You listed qualities, like you are writing me a reference letter. You have not once said you love me for who I am, just what I provide. That is not true. Then tell me this, I said, leaning forward slightly. If Craig had asked you to come back to him at any point during our marriage, would you have stayed with me? Her hesitation was brief, but unmistakable, and it told me everything I needed to know. I think we are done here, I said, standing up. Jack, please, she grabbed my wrist. We can work through this. Go to counseling, rebuild trust. People overcome bigger problems than this all the time. I looked down at her, this woman I had loved so completely, and felt a wave of sadness rather than anger. The problem is not that you still care for Craig, or that you lied about seeing him. The problem is that our entire marriage was built on a foundation of you settling for second best. I deserve better than that, and honestly so do you. Are you saying there is no chance for us? Her voice cracked. I am saying goodbye, Emily. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had put down a heavy burden I had not even realized I was carrying. The year that followed was both the most challenging and most transformative of my life. I completed my transfer to Seattle, where the constant rain matched my mood for the first few months. I found an apartment with a view of Puget Sound, nothing fancy but all mine. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward, since we had few assets to divide and no children to consider, though Emily contested it, initially dragging things out with desperate attempts at reconciliation. I learned later through mutual friends that Emily had indeed tried to reconnect with Craig after I left, confirming all my suspicions. Their rekindled relationship lasted less than 2 months. Apparently, the same issues that had separated them the first time resurfaced immediately. Craig was still married to his work. Emily still wanted more attention than he could give. The grass that had seemed greener from a distance proved to be just as challenging to maintain up close. In Seattle, I slowly rebuilt my life. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion within 6 months. I joined a hiking group, rediscovering my love for the outdoors that had somewhat diminished during my marriage. I made new friends, people who knew me only as I was now, not as half of Jack and Emily. I also spent time in therapy, working through the feelings of inadequacy and betrayal that threatened to color my view of all relationships. My therapist helped me recognize that Emily's actions reflected her issues, not my worth. I learned to see the warning signs I had ignored, and to recognize the difference between being kind and being a doormat. Dating again was challenging. For the first 6 months, I avoided it entirely, focusing on healing. When I finally downloaded a dating app, I approached each interaction with caution, perhaps too much so. The first few dates were awkward, my guard so high that genuine connection was impossible. But gradually, I learned to balance healthy boundaries with openness, to be vulnerable, without being naive. Now, 1 year after that fateful night when Emily confessed her true feelings, I can look back with perspective rather than pain. I do not regret my marriage despite how it ended. I loved authentically, gave generously, and remained true to my values throughout. The fact that Emily could not reciprocate does not diminish the genuineness of what I offered. What I regret is ignoring my intuition for so long, dismissing the signs that something was fundamentally wrong in our relationship. I regret not valuing myself enough to demand complete honesty and full commitment. I regret settling for being someone's safe choice rather than their passionate preference. These are lessons I carry forward, not as baggage, but as wisdom. I am dating someone new now, a physician named Allison, who approaches relationships with the same straightforwardness and integrity that I do. We are taking things slowly, building a foundation of genuine friendship and respect before anything else. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed that night at the hospital, if I had driven Emily home afterward and tried to work through her confession. Would we have limped along in a half-truth of a marriage for years, maybe decades? Would I have spent my life as someone's second choice, always wondering if she was thinking of him? I am grateful now for the clarity of that moment, painful as it was. Emily's unfiltered honesty, spoken in a moment of crisis, gave me the information I needed to make the right choice for myself. Walking away was not giving up, but rather an act of self-respect and courage. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives are also the most necessary, clearing away what is false to make room for what is true. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is recognize when a relationship has reached its end, when holding on would cost us our dignity and self-worth. Sometimes walking away is not about giving up, but about knowing your worth and choosing peace. What difficult decision have you made that ultimately set you free? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding your way forward. And do not forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that choosing themselves is not selfish but necessary. Thank you for listening, and remember, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a better one.